dear friends of Cosmic Agency. My name is Gosha, and I think you will be very pleased with the video that I will publish today. I'm going to be probably watching it with you, so say hello to me in the chat. It's going to be probably a video that you will like very much, even though I didn't have in mind making this video, or I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to make this video. And for a very long time I even thought I'm never gonna make this video because I didn't think it was that relevant to the message and the information itself. I wanted very strongly to just focus on the information coming from Swaruu and then from Yazhi, and knowing that that story between Swaruu and Yazhi is quite complicated and might stretch the 3D understanding of reality, even though we have been talking about these subjects for a very long time. So knowing that, I strictly decided to just avoid going into detail on the subject and just focus on the information itself. But I have come to the conclusion, after reading many comments that you leave here and there, that I have come to the conclusion that a lot of people are very confused about who Yazhi is and how she appeared and how she got into the scene and how she relates to Swaruu. Because I was also saying Swaruu, Yazhi are the same person, but not really the same person. It was never really explained in detail. So to avoid those confusions and to set this story straight once and for all, and you will understand it in detail what happened and who they are, Yazhi, Swaruu. So I decided to make this video. I'm also making this video to stop many wild theories that are circulating out there about what might have happened to Swaruu and who is Yazhi. And I have seen so many really crazy theories about Swaruu being kidnapped by the Federation or held prisoner, and all kinds of things. And you'll see very clearly what has happened to her and who Yazhi is. You will also understand a very interesting, fascinating and important topic of soul looping. And this is going to be a next topic that I will discuss in detail with Yazhi. It's to do with soul reincarnation, but there is much more to this. And I think that thanks to this story, Swaruu's story, and her soul looping, you will understand how. Then I'm giving it context for that very future soul looping video. So I think it's very appropriate that these two videos are published at the same time. I'm going to present different elements here to this story. First, I'm going to present, in Aneeka's words, Swaruu's story itself in a very big summary. So we'll go back to the beginning of Swaruu, and you'll see that throughout time, let's call it that way, there are more than one Swaruu, and this is where the topic of soul looping comes in. Then you will see the arrival of Yazhi Swaruu. Yazhi Swaruu arrived here, from what I remember, in around September 2019, and they cohabited together, Yazhi Swaruu and Swaruu, at the same time. Now, for the sake of understanding, and on the basis of what I already said, that there are multiple Swaruus, like there are multiples of us at the same time as well. You have to open your mind to these higher, high-dimensional ideas that sometimes you can come across your other you from the past or future, because it's everything happening at the same time. From the perspective of the ether, you might find yourself with your other yous in the same room, in the same timeline, in the same space-time, and share stories. And this is what has happened. So we are going to call in this video Swaruu that we talked to Swaruu 9, and then Yazhi is Swaruu 12. So you will see the story of her arrival. It will be explained by Aneeka. Aneeka is going to explain how it was for her and for the crew to see Yazhi arriving. It's going to be very fascinating. Then you will see how they both describe the moment they both cohabited. They were both cohabiting on the ship at the same time for a while, Yazhi and Swaruu, and they were basically the same consciousness in two different people. So you'll see how that worked out for both of them. And then we're going to pass on to the next point in the history, which is Swaruu 9's transition. Transition, let's call it into Yazhi, but it can also, and very validly so, be called her death. Basically, she did die. We didn't say it exactly in that way because, on the other hand, we and even Taygettans themselves didn't understand fully what happened to Swaruu at the time. You'll see this in a story presented by Aneeka. And then we will explain the differences, finally in the end, the differences between the two. Because even though they do share the same thread of consciousness, and Swaruu 12 contains the memories of Swaruu 9 and others, they are still two different people. And they have different personality, different habits, and different views. So you're going to understand this very clearly. Enjoy very much. And see you in the chat. We are going to begin with Aneeka telling a story of Swaruu in a very, very big detail, because Swaruu's life is very complex, very, very complicated, and it has to do with the phenomenon of soul looping. This will explain why Swaruu was quite a nostalgic person. She has carried a lot of memories, a lot of past traumas, a lot of experiences, responsibilities, and duties, and she was a sort of a sad person, even though she was also very strong and determined. She was a nostalgic person, and this story will explain that part of her personality. So I'm going to leave you with Aneeka right now.
The first Swaruu, called Swaruu Ananda, or what we will call S1, was born of mother and father, and she was a Taygetan from Era. Born there, lived there, never left, never traveled, died there. Her mother left her there, hiding her from some form of persecution. She lived in a house by a lake deep in Era's woodlands. She was left there alone at age 13, and remained for the rest of her life awaiting for the return of her parents. Taygetan women, when extremely lonely, for other reasons as well, but mainly when they're lonely and desperate, can self-impregnate with a process called parthenogenesis. Human females can do that as well, but it is extremely rare, especially nowadays. She was alone in the middle of a forest, no one to talk to, no one to keep her company other than pets. She got herself pregnant at age 20 after living 7 years alone there. Of course, it had to be a little girl, and as there is no father, the offspring is an exact genetic replica or natural clone of the mother. It was her, born again, 100% same genes. But, as we here have empirically seen and even studied, when two bodies are exactly the same, clones, especially natural, as artificial ones are not perfect enough, consciousness tends to equalize among the clones, meaning full telepathy, being able to focus their attention on being one or the other, or both. So the mother, S1, and little S2 basically were the same person, but from what I understand, the process takes a few years to complete, as the little one needs 7 years to fully absorb or fully develop a mature nervous system, mature enough to incorporate in a full all the consciousness of a person, remembering that the brain is only a translator for consciousness that resides in the etheric field, not in the body. S1 was very sad inside and lonely, and naturally, she devoted herself to raising her little child. But as the child grew up and started to play more, and then to be more independent, everything began to be wonderful. Everything was new and inspiring. She wanted to explore, to live. So as she grew up, it became more and more interesting to have her attention on being the child and not the mother, as the mother became only the problem solver and the provider, and also with deep feelings of sorrow and abandonment. It was not inspiring, much less comfortable to be the mother, only when she, the consciousness, needed something that the child could not do or understand. So as S2, the child, grew up to be a teenager, at age 13, she became more and more independent, leaving home for long periods of time, and she neglected the mother as in she was no longer needed. And as all things that have no attention, as a body does not work, cannot exist without a soul, one day, when the 13-year-old child was far away exploring, the mother died while sleeping. Now the child was alone once more. The little girl was alone there at age 13, again. Both the mother and the little one, Swaruu 1 and Swaruu 2, always wanted to explore, to get out of there, always looking up to the stars and wanting to travel among them. The little one, Swaruu 2, all alone had no choice but to bury her mother herself, away from the house in the woods. But living there became simply unbearable, remembering all she was hurting inside, all what the mother resented and wanted that never came. At age 13, she remembered everything that was her mother, as she was her again in a new body. However, this time she was not going to sit and wait as her mother or grandparents had not returned in no less than 20 errand years. So she packed everything in a bag and walked for days, camping in the wild, until she came to a town, to civilization. She made her way off planet to Temur and joined the equivalent of an academy to become an explorer out in space. First, she studied communications, where she excelled in exo languages, and then became a pilot that later, with her motivation and her skills, made her become or be upgraded to the equivalent of fighter pilot. Using human words, as I have no other to talk to you all with. As fighter pilot, she excelled again, making her qualify for the elite squadron of tactical and strategic time jumpers known as Sandcloak, humanized term, Sandcloak, Seyna Olkiti. Already as a pilot, and while she was awaiting a fighter-class starship to be either built or one to be assigned to her, she took the job of communications officer on board the starship Ritol, Tolika class, under Captain Rachel of Temur. And as the ship was deploying to Earth, because it is on Earth and near Earth where all the action was taking place, she came to Earth orbit in it. It was November 2015 in Earth time. In December, same year, 2015, a new generation of fighter-class ships was introduced, called Suzy class. Suzy, Sasakahana, advanced. Uriknasaka, combat or fighting. Zurga, technology. Ineketas, starship. It was not assigned to her at first, but as it was new and commencing real-world trials, she asked to be transferred to be part of her new experimental crew. She then traveled in Susie with 6 others, mostly engineers, to Aldebaran Sindriel to try out the ship in its second trip. First, Temer Earth. She volunteered to be left alone in the ship, in low Sindriel orbit, while she remained 1 or 2 weeks. Sindriel Aldebaran is known for causing extreme mystic experiences of transcendental types. This on the surface, but little was known that the effects would be stronger when alone in a little ship going round and round that mysterious planet. As Swaruu 2 said herself, it was terrifying to stare at the huge orange giant sun Aldebaran, submerged in this nebula that permits it to be observed with the naked eye or with basic filters only. As she explains, this experience of having been alone in a little ship with Aldebaran caused some kind of awakening in her. She remembers crying and crying a lot while looking out of the windows in Susie's cockpit, with Aldebaran there looking back at her. She was never the same after that experience. Profound changes occurred inside her. After the rest of the crew reunited, they returned to Earth, where the ship Susie was officially assigned to her as her ship, as a fighter pilot. As the ship's artificial intelligence and Swaruu 2 worked and got along very well, one for the other. And it is there, in December 2015, where Swaruu 2's career as a tactical and strategic time jumper began. She dedicated herself as a Sandcloak fighter pilot with one of the most advanced fighter-class ships Taigetans have constructed up to that point. There is a Susie 2 now, even more advanced, and it is the ship Yazhi has, and in the hangar. Swaruu 2 started time jumping, basically to alter points in Earth's history to cause a more favorable outcome for humanity in these troubled times. She appeared in various points in history, always as herself, as a step down, always in nexus point, always in critical moments, becoming key people in Earth's history, or causing key people to alter their actions in a way that afforded a more positive long-term outcome, becoming key people not as in entering their body, but as in appearing as herself to talk to the people of those points in history, which made her being remembered as another character or person in Earth's history. This, as to be expected, many times caused events not to go her way, entering in conflict with many notorious people in Earth's history, resulting in her death. But as part of how the reincarnation cycles work, or are understood by Taigetan people, after she died, her consciousness returned into being born as Swaruu 2 again, in Era, in the little house in the woods by the lake. So the new one would be called Swaruu 3. Then she lived all what I have described above, remembering her past incarnation as herself and as a Sandcloak fighter pilot. Recap: Swaruu 1 was born from a mother and father. Then Swaruu 2, also known as Swaruu Papriyananda, was the first one from parthenogenesis. Then Swaruus 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are Swaruu Papriyananda too, looping back to have the same life, always being born in the same place, in the little house in the woods by the lake. But as she remembered her previous life, and all she did in it, it is as if it were another Swaruu, hence the added numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Swaruu 9, Swaruu you talk to, is a node or a difficult Swaruu. She manages to redo just about everything she did during those 8 previous incarnations, but avoiding the problems and what ended her lives. Remembering that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 herself all worked and lived a life of an elite fighter squadron, Sandclock, altering timelines and events in them for strategic and tactical reasons. Definition of strategic: an action that determines the outcome of an entire way or scenario. Definition of tactical: a strategy used in combat, used to confront or manage a situation or the enemy. Swaruu 9 wanted to stop all she was doing as she found out that timelines did not work as they say they do, even in Temer at the Academy. This as a result of her accumulated experience throughout 9 incarnations. So 9 ended up stopping herself from time jumping for any reason whatsoever as an attempt to correct her own life, because she realized that when you time jump to alter a timeline, the only timeline you really alter is your own. So she concluded that there was no point in continuing to time jump, because ultimately she was not achieving anything for the other people or collective, and only resulted in the destruction of her own life, as it had become very entangled as a result of all her previous lifetimes time jumping with her ship Susie. As an attempt to forget her past, and therefore to advance as a person with a clean slate, she chose to go down to Earth in 2 separate timelines of 9 to become someone else. But the 9 you all know and knew and talked to died here in this ship last year. Swaruu 9 constantly repeated what her other variants had done, but always escaping her persecutors, as she knew forehand what and when everything would occur, enabling her to escape on time. This is a constant with 9, all she was before she did it again, making her believe that she was the ultimate Swaruu, in her necessity to perfect what she had done, and in her personal necessity to overcome all what went wrong during her previous incarnations, repeating but correcting. And she concluded that it was empty, void of meaning and useless.
Now, some of you might be asking why she was looping. What's up with that soul looping? And I asked both Aneeka and Yazhi what their thoughts are on this question, on this topic. And first you're going to hear Aneeka respond to that question, and then Yazhi herself will explain why Swaruu's soul was looping. Additionally, I think it's a very important subject to understand when it comes to carrying guilt and karmas and things we want to correct and perfect and make better and improve. I think there is a lot to learn from this story and from the future video on soul looping in order to achieve more liberation in our spiritual journey, to understand the mechanics of how souls work, and to be able to choose with more data on the table. I'm going to leave you with a video. Why was Swaruu's soul looping?
She kept looping because she was attached to the idea of winning, of doing it again, of course succeeding. I understand it is only because of what she wanted as a soul. Same problem as when a suicidal person dies, only comes back to become himself again, in the same lifetime, having to do it all again, never returning to source. So she goes on, studies again in the academy, returns to Earth, becomes a fighter pilot, time jumps, tries to solve an Earth problem conflict issue in some point in history, and gets killed again. So she goes back and is born again in the little house in Era by the lake, and it starts all over again as Swaruu 4, 5, 6, etc.
She always dies on Earth or around Earth?
As I understand, Swaruu 4 died in Era at a young age because she fell off a rock she was climbing freestyle. All Swaroos except the little one, Yazhi, have that as their sport.
When you remember who you are, you can do that. And you don't really go back to the afterlife, much less source. Because in the afterlife, you discharge from your self-defining concepts and all the ideas and thoughts that make you up as an individual. So you can do that if you hold knowledge of who you are, because even when you are dead, you are still you, and you only say, "Great, I'm dead again, rats." But most people simply try something else, saying, nice life, but I didn't like this, and so I better move on. So they leave and shed those things that bind them to an identity. And that freedom of identity is the afterlife. But it is not complete removal of all identity, as you do not forget, but you discharge and move on to being someone else if you want. But what happened to Swaroos is that they were so fixated on doing things right, on being the best of the best of the best, that they do not or did not take defeat as an option. So even in death, they only saw it as an opportunity to become even better at what they do. She never discharged, rested, or healed. How can you not go to the afterlife when you die? So where did she go? You can jump directly into the same fetus awaiting a soul at the exact spot in space-time. No afterlife. You just go back to the same exact spot in time where your soul, attention point of consciousness, enters the fetus developing. And you start all over again, under the very same circumstances. And it only changes life as a second, third, or fourth rerun. It only changes when you purposefully remember what happened before, to the point where you can even remember and predict the exact moment in time when an event will take place, to the utmost details, as in knowing when a person will appear at the door. And the more you loop, the more you remember. So that's when you start changing those events you remember, and you start living a different version of your very same life, but with a different outcome. Wow, nuts! Nothing nuts about this. Everyone who remembers past lives knows this, and even more. Everyone on Earth and elsewhere do this, especially the people who commit suicide. They go back to do it again, but it's harder the next time, because they make it harder on themselves. But even more deeply, Yazhi, why didn't she see the defeat as the option? What caused that fixation in her on winning this? She suffered a lot and wanted to resolve that. Also, had a deep need to be able to solve what she felt went wrong, and what she felt was her responsibility. So guilt was present there as well, a sense of responsibility over past actions, because as a fighter pilot with sand clock capability, it did and does feel like or as if everything depended on her. But she was not the only one doing things on Earth. There were many races of the Federation and not only present on Earth. So why so much feeling of responsibility? Yes, but nevertheless, the feeling of the others are not doing enough, so I must do it all, did remain. So that is one of the strongest reasons. And feeling responsible for countless other little or smaller things that went wrong, as things always do go wrong here and there all the time. It does cause a fixation to want to fix all you think or perceive you did wrong and must do right next time. I see. And another question, how do you know Swaruu 9 didn't loop back again to 2 somewhere? Because I am her, and I would remember. I am her, but not only. Thank you very much both for this explanation. And now we will move on to Yazhi's Swaruu 12's arrival on the ship. This will be described by Aneeka.
Now, another Swaruu that didn't die had a little girl, again parthenogenesis clone, Swaruu 10, also known as Swaruu X. First Swaruu ever to be born outside Era and in other conditions. This Swaruu we have not encountered yet, but according to Yazhi and to Susie's data banks, Swaruu 9 raised her with full intent to develop her at her most as her replacement. For what I know, she was overeducated, super trained, and super fit. We don't know much about Swaruu X, but it looks like she had extreme adventures and also restarted time jumping at a level never seen before, contrary to Swaruu 9 and her attempts to stop making her own life more complicated. Swaruu X was known for having extreme mental power and psychic abilities. She never skimped using whenever needed, making her detractors or enemies fear her in extreme throughout the ages, whenever that was. Swaruu X was known to appear and work simultaneously with, from, and in other planets, not only on Earth, but working from the bigger picture wherever events taking place elsewhere in the galaxy had a direct effect on what occurred on Earth, and in other places in the local star neighborhood, such as Alpha Centauri, Hades, Vega, and Pleiades, among others. Swaruu X also had a little daughter, self-clone known as Swaruu 11. According to Susie's data banks, she was called the Portal, perfecting even more all the abilities of Swaruu X and increasing them even more, living and coexisting with her biological mother, Swaruu X. Both worked on a project to expand their minds and their understanding about the nature of reality in general. Also dedicating a lot of time researching means to alter collective timelines, abandoning the old Swaruu 9 concept that as you alter timelines, you only can alter your own. As I understand, Swaruu X and Swaruu 11 worked trying out their theories for a very long period of time, probably a few thousand Earth years. jumping to points within, not living them directly for the duration, also working on a way to solve their own problems, the destruction of their identity, and even of their biology as a result of so much self-cloning and parthenogenesis, combined with the after and side effects of extreme jumping and time-slipping using artificial means, with a starship, concluding that the only way was to accept their fate and not try to mend it, as it would only result in further complications. So their conclusion was to perfect themselves genetically, as they were master experts in genetics, since several incarnations of their own variants, solving problems, mostly genetic, because they were becoming a clone of a clone of a clone, and also with the full intention of becoming masters of their own reality. So, in a planned way, when Swaruu 11 was pregnant with her own clone, she lived off Earth in an undisclosed location. And when Swaruu 11 was to give birth, she made her starship jump into hyperspace to give birth in the ether, in order for the newborn not to belong anywhere. And according to their experiments, it also could or would mean that the little one would be deeply mentally affected by being born in the ether, and with this, granting her with special faculties and powers the others did not have. And so, 12 was born, Swaruu 12. Going back a little, it is important to say or state that Swaruu 9, after a legal battle with the Federation, managed to emancipate herself from legally being of any place, and therefore being the master of herself, and not having to abide by any agreements of space law, becoming an independent entity as Swaruu, legally turning her own name, Swaruu, from a personal name to a species name or legal entity name, a species of her own. This during 2018 year, Earth time. What was of Swaruu X? We don't know, as it is not in Susie's log files, but the best estimate that Swaruu X is still out there jumping and doing whatever in the wind, with the real potential of her showing up here or wherever as she may see fit, at her whim.
Why no files of her? Shouldn't everything be in there?
Many files of her, but they do not mention an ending of Swaruu X anywhere, as if the ship had been cut off from her, not being able to log any further. As for Swaruu 11, the logbooks indicate she was entirely devoted to raising her child and forming or making her grow to her full potential. As she was doing this, she had the habit of time jumping all over the place, time and space, Earth and other planets, to show her little daughter 12 all the historical scenarios and how they went, and to have her see places and events, and pick up knowledge from everywhere possible as she grew up. All this for educative purposes. As they were doing this, they found themselves to be visiting Bronze Age Scotland, where 12 first set foot on Earth. When camping outside the ship, they were attacked by the tribe called the Tuatha the Danann while sleeping,
And Swaruu 11
was skilled. They had attacked other Swaruu variants, like Swaruu 8 before, and did it again. I understand in a different matter, so Swaruu 11 could not anticipate the attack. They hunted down little Swaruu 12, aged 8 or 9, but she managed to escape hiding in the bushes at night, and running away into the woods, managing to call her mother's ship Susie that swooped down and picked her up in the middle of the night. With Swaruu X nowhere to be seen, little Swaruu 12 was left completely alone. Swaroos were more or less accustomed to lose their mothers at age 13 and having to fend for themselves alone at that young age. But this one, 12, had to face her destiny as Swaruu on her own at age 8 or 9 at the most. Remembering that the consciousness of Swaruu mother was or is in the daughter at the same time, Swaruu 11 was living inside her. Swaruu 12, remembering all what her mother taught her, meaning experience she had accumulated during her previous incarnations and lifetimes, and the information she had acquired herself at that age directly, decided to use her time-space maps and time jump to look for what she calls a replacement mother, choosing for whatever reason to look for Swaruu 9, arriving to this present timeline in early September 2019, where she appeared in her Susie starship out of hyperspace and requested landing clearance in this big ship, Tolika. Back then, Swaruu 9 was living on board the Tolika with the rest of the Taigetans, so I, Aneeka, remember when she arrived personally.
Describe a bit more the moment of her arrival, please. How was it? People's reactions. Nine's reaction.
I remember Swaruu 9 running to meet her in the hangar as 12 Susie was landing. Swaruu 9 was happy and at the same time had a clear touch of sadness in her face. But she was the first one to run to greet her. Of course, none here knew who was in that Susie ship, and I must say that there was another Susie parked in the same hangar, exactly the same as the one landing, being it the very same ship present twice in the same space-time, the other one pertaining to Swaruu 9, insisting that they were the very same ship down to their serial numbers, TPT 155.
But how do you just appear out of ether, outside of Toleka? Suddenly? Or she used propulsion coming near Toleka? All this sounds normal to you, but people would ask these kinds of details.
12 Susie appeared out of hyperspace about 1.5 AU from Earth and then coasted with plasma jet propulsion to rendezvous with Tolika. AU equals astronomical unit. 1 AU equals the average distance between Earth and the Sun.
Cool. Okay, how did you all react?
We were all quite perplexed because at first, from the bridge where I was, we thought it was Swaruu 9 approaching us. But we had just seen her a few moments before, and we were quite sure Susie was in the hangar, as she was. It quickly dawned on us that it was different Swaruu approaching, as Swaruu 9 had warned us many times before that this could happen. In the hangar, 12 Susie's ramp went down, and out walked a slender, thin, long-looking Swaruu in a long dress, and walked to Swaruu 9 that was right there at the base of the ramp, and they hugged each other. I remember Swaruu 9's first words were in the line of, "What took you so long?" as if she was expecting her, like a replacement in her own words later.
How old did she look then?
Swaruu 12 looked 14 or 15 years old at the most in that moment. Later, we found out it was a trick because she was wearing makeup. In an expert manner, making her look older, also using other tricks, all as an effort to look much older than what she really was, fooling us all to think she was 14 or 15 years old and not 8 or 9 years old. This basically as little girl mischief.
Why did she want to appear older?
She allegedly says that she feared not being taken seriously if she appeared as the child she was and is, and also wanting to arrive giving the impression that she was in control of her situation and not arriving as a little crying girl who had just lost her mum. Also, because she did not know who was on the ship, how we would receive her, and it was safer for her to appear older, therefore less vulnerable.
What was the others' reaction and yours?
The overall reaction was of amazement and expectation, the crew mostly observing in silence or whispering things at one another. My reaction was of expectation and of worry, as I felt deep inside me that her arrival would only complicate things for us all.
Very cool, very interesting. Now, just to tell you that for a while, before Swaruu's passing and Swaruu 12 fully taking over as a replacement, so to speak, they actually cohabited for a while. Yes, they were on the ship at the same time, and it will be explained by Aneeka and by Yazhi also how that was for them, how it was from Aneeka's perspective to be in the presence of both at the same time, and how it was for Yazhi and for Swaruu, because Yazhi can speak for both now, how it was for them and how it feels to be present and to be aware of two bodies at the same time. So I'm going to give it to them. Okay, at this point, maybe do explain if these types of experiences are common up there, or was it something new for you to experience?
Although parthenogenesis is known and statistically not uncommon in Taygetan culture, on a day-to-day level, it is rare to even know of a mother that had birthed her own child that way. Whenever it was known, it was a curiosity, and it is not something easy to find as to interact with such a mother and daughter. Comparing this to Earth's identical twins and how recurrent this is. In Taygeta, it is about twice as common as identical twins are on Earth, but personally, I have never seen another mother and daughter other than the Swaruus, and the other people I've asked so far haven't either. So it is a rare event, and it usually stops at one cycle. That is, one woman will have a parthenogenesis daughter, and that's all. When that daughter grows up, she usually has a normal child with a male partner. So what we have here and have experienced here with the Swaruus is even rarer. Therefore, we here are all experiencing this in a cautious and flabbergasted way. Some people here, more scientifically inclined, like Alahi, Senetre, and Eridania, all conduct regular sensor readings and medical checks on Swaruu 12 Yazhi in an effort to understand how she operates and the process her body goes through in her day-to-day life. Swaruus, they're all self-clones, all from parthenogenesis. They are all genetically identical, and the physical differences between them, small, but there are the result of habit changes and self-concept ideas.
How did it feel for both of you to be at the same space and time together? At some point you told me that it is like listening to 2 songs or more at once. For a Swaruu, it is quite natural, as they all come into this world as 2 people with 1 consciousness, including myself. The only difference is that I had the capacity to be in 3 bodies simultaneously, not in 2, because I had my grandmother, Swaruu 10, also called Swaruu X, and my mother, Swaruu 11, with me while I was little, 0 to 8 years old. It feels like changing cars, meaning it is still you who is thinking, but you take on the personality that defines one in particular. It would be like changing cars, but all of the same model and brand. Because you do have a feeling of being inside, as if the body were a suit for you, the real you. You don't feel you are going in or out of your bodies. You are just in one and then in another. And here is when it gets complicated to explain, because you can hold conscious attention on 3 places at the same time, as in getting feedback from 3 places, 3 bodies, doing different things simultaneously, and you are seeing and watching what they are all doing and deciding what they are doing and what they will do next. This is easy when they are not doing anything complicated, or when they are doing something that uses high muscle memory as an automated task you've done many times before. But if one of your points of attention gets into a complicated spot, for example, something that is not coming out right, and I don't know why, then you must pause the other bodies, 1 or the 2 others, to place full attention on the one doing the difficult task. Those 2 bodies that are left waiting are usually just sit in and with a thinking, frowning expression on their face, and then they move on. And mostly people see this as what every person does anyway. This means that I am seeing with 6 sets of eyes and 3 completely different places. You have your awareness on 3 places at once. The problem to describe this is that humans have nothing to relate this to, because even having 3 TV or computer screens in front of them is not the equivalent, because they can only place their attention on one of the 3 screens at the same time. So this is something that I know is alien to humans, and I am perfectly aware of this. But this ability is Swaruunian, and I know it is not easy to understand, although Taigetan women also hold the same ability with their Parthenogenesis daughters. But it is important to state that although Swaruunians can see and even think 2 ways or even 3 ways simultaneously, each performance or interaction people would have with each one of the 3 differs. And the feeling when placing your attention on one or the other also differs, because they are different, holding other experiences in their body memory due to having lived different things. So each body also holds a specific personality that you, the consciousness behind them all, also notice and even use to your advantage. And this ability is exclusivity of females, because men simply cannot self-replicate. Unless another one of them comes from a different timeline and they meet, no? Or that would not be the same at all. As soon as they are together and they drop their mental telepathic firewalls, they synchronize, yes. But while they have mental firewalls operating, they may even have a bit of a fight as I did have with Swaruu 9 many times. She was a stubborn and hard-headed girl. And the next point in the story is the moment of Swaruu's passing. Yes, it can be seen, and it was death. However, it wasn't exactly as it is understood from the Earth's perspective, and you'll see how and why that happened. We never really talked about this, as I said, because we were still processing this information, and Taigetans themselves were processing what happened. They couldn't fully understand exactly what was happening and how to even present this to the people, and whether it should be presented to the people, because it might stretch credibility, it might add, to the cosmic saga, story. Something that some people in the Spanish world were complaining about a while back, that we are, presenting this cosmic soap opera, but that this is life. This is what happens on the ship. This is what happens in 5D. This is, just part of life. And these phenomena are part of life, even in 3D. We are just not aware of it. We are not accessing the memory of those phenomena here, but this is nature of reality. Even though, as you will see, as explained by Aneeka, these types of phenomena are not very common to their ordinary, let's call it, Taigetan society, and that's why even they, for a very long time, didn't know exactly how to address this. So we decided to just focus on the information coming from Yazhi and avoid these complicated and complex, twisted, metaphysical aspects of the story. Swaruu 12, Yazhi, she was simply explaining to us, no, I am Swaruu, I am her, she's in me, and nothing changed, she's in me, her consciousness is me. So we just took it as that, as her being a more expanded version of Swaruu 9, and we didn't mention anything about her having now a child's body, being in a child's body, because Yazhi is a child in the body, because it was just too complicated to explain at the time, and again it was stretching the credibility factor here a little bit for some people perhaps. So again, our decision was to just focus on the information. Anyway, you'll see the whole story from Aneeka and from Yazhi's words.
We had all noticed in the ship that Swaruu 9 was weak, in not eating at all or hardly eating, if anything. But as she had displayed that kind of behavior for years now, we didn't think much of it. She was very thin though, and this fact did worry Sinetre, the ship's surgeon, quite a lot, because we remembered that when Swaruu 9 first arrived with us, mid-2017, she was very athletic. She spent many hours in her room alone and hardly came out to interact with the rest of us in the ship. This happened progressively, more and more often, since the arrival of Yazhi's Swaruu 12. I personally did notice that Swaruu 9 and Swaruu 12 were getting along in a strange manner, noticing some resistance at first coming from Swaruu 9 to the presence of Swaruu 12. Swaruu 9 took on the task of mothering little Swaruu 12 Yazhi, taking care of her, never leaving her alone, and coaching her, teaching her all she could, explaining things to her around the ship about what others were doing, procedures and movements, as any mother would do. But it was clear that this mothering attitude of Swaruu 9 was taking also with a good degree of resistance from Swaruu 12, because the little one always knew everything Swaruu 9 was trying to show her or teach her. So the little one was always with a, duh, I already know that attitude, also explaining the same things back to Swaruu 9, but in a much more detailed way. This caused clear frustration in Swaruu 9, and it was noticeable by all, causing friction among them, and even an argument or two that a few months later became progressively more common, to the point where it looked like they were always fighting among each other. And as it started, also progressively, things started to smoothing out among them, and then ended up in a strange calm between them both, where they were always agreeing on everything. We all noticed that Swaruu 9's opinion started to shift strongly towards Swaruu 12's. I now understand that their consciousnesses were blending as one, and clearly noticing that the mind of Swaruu 12 was taking over the mind of Swaruu 9. What we experienced was a clear mind blend between Swaruu 9 and Swaruu 12 Yazhi, but not as in both having 50 and 50% or in mixing both consciousnesses in a uniform way, being that each would have an equal amount of the other. We experienced a clear assimilation where the stronger mind of Swaruu 12 Yazhi overrode the lesser developed or weaker Swaruu 9 consciousness. So it was Swaruu 12 using Swaruu 9's body towards the end. Towards the end, it was clear that they were the same person, and Swaruu 9 was gone. I mean, you could talk to her, and she remembered events and things we did together and remembered personal details and all. But so did the little one, Swaruu 12. She also remembered everything, every little detail about and all of what Swaruu 9 lived and remembered. This was quite an awkward thing to see and experience for us all in the ship, as we had never experienced such a strong and clear mind blend. Coming back to Swaruu 9's deteriorating body, we noticed that she was losing a lot of weight. The ship's surgeon, Sinetri, prepared daily protein and high nutritious liquid meals, protein shakes, for Swaruu 9, and I remember she complained a lot for having to take them. Later, we discovered that Swaruu 9, unfortunately, was dumping the carefully engineered protein shakes into the toilet to avoid drinking them. Towards the end of Swaruu 9, her last few months, she was reclusive and hardly came out of her room, where she used her time mostly on everything computers, mostly working on this disclosure. She hardly ate at all, and by this time, there was little the others could do to help her, as even the ship's surgeon had given up with her protein shakes because it was well known that Swaruu 9 was not drinking them, and forcing her to do so in front of us was not a practical thing to do. Although her consciousness was blended with Swaruu 12 at this time, many of the automated reactions and emotional triggers remained as bodily-only reaction, and Swaruu 9 was very stubborn. Oh yes, she was. On the morning of March 21, 2020, Swaruu did not give any sign of being in her room, but as she had previously displayed a very reclusive and even hermit attitude, this was not seen as all that strange, because all the extroverted attitude and all the attention was going to Swaruu 12 anyway, as she was and is all over the ship and has always something to do and to say and to share with everyone here all the time, taking up a lot of energy and attention in general and of all here. That day, we did notice somewhat suspicious attitude in the little one, as if she were hiding something. So one thing led to another, and Alanim, Sinetri, and I went to knock on Swaruu 9's bedroom door. She did not open. After a while of waiting there, Alanim, our leader, overrid the pneumatic door's lock under her authority, and we walked into her room. She was gone. She was not there. All her things were there, all her clothes, all her shoes, and all her personal belongings as well. We looked everywhere in the ship, and even in her Susie in the hangar above. She was nowhere to be found. So naturally, we went to see and ask the little Swaruu 12 to demand an explanation about what had happened to Swaruu 9, and the little one insisted, and still insists, that she just dissolved or evaporated into the ethers. She explained that Swaruu 9 was gone, her body dissolved. No need to bury her or to give her any burial services or honors. She kept repeating over and over that Swaruu 9 was her and in her, and that was just a body, and that it was a mess and failing all over, no longer useful and obsolete. We were all naturally very alarmed and did not know how to handle this high strangeness event. Little did we know that Swaruu 12 was soon to start displaying more extremely uncommon abilities that challenged everyone's mental and psychological well-being. At that time, we did not know how to handle the strange situation ourselves, so we did not know how to explain to Swaruu 9's followers and to Gosha and Robert what had happened to her. We thought it would only hurt credibility and cause unnecessary problems. We did need a few months to understand what was going on, and we also needed a few months to even think of how to explain this to the larger public, if ever. Swaruu 12, Yazhi, insists that we're not physical and that there is nothing as material world, and the only thing that holds it up is a bunch of ideas and attachments. And knowing this, and knowing that our bodies are the closest materialized ideas we all hold, she explains that all she needed to do was to mentally focus on Swaruu 9's body, dissolving into material energy, and that is what she was anyway. Soon enough, Swaruu 12 started displaying extreme abilities that defy all we knew to be possible, and adding stress to our mental health as well, because such abilities are not seen in our culture, simply not possible, and only understood as something that beings of higher realms do, and not here where we are in our density. Swaruu 12, Yazhi, started moving extremely fast inside the ship, was several decks above in the hangar, walking to someone, and as we called her for dinner, we turned around and she was sitting in her place at the table, in literally no time at all. She was building card castles in front of people in the passageways as they walked through, and she started to play practical jokes like stealing your food from the plate from under the table, through the solid table and solid china. Nothing of sort remotely is ever seen in our culture, causing a lot of stress in us all here. As time went by, we started to adjust to her strange ways and simply accepted them as part of her, also realizing and accepting that she is not like the rest of us here and completely another species never seen before. She still does mischievous things, because mischief for fun has always been a clear characteristic of Swaruu 12 as the little girl she is. For example, right now, as I write these words, she is very much into suddenly creeping up behind people or materializing there to frighten them with a beep beep just for a laugh. And she continues to do so after explaining to her that that joke does scare people and startles them badly. She is not an adult in a child's body. She is clearly a child, even in her ways and her attitudes, games and personality. But she is not a child, or only a child either, because she holds great wisdom and memory knowledge. So it was and has been a difficult task for us all here to even know how to treat her, because it is not okay to treat her as a simple child, and it is not correct to treat her as an adult either, and that somewhere in between is difficult to find and precise, more like having to adjust constantly to her moods and requirements depending on what she is doing or saying.
Her body was a mess inside. She was undernourished and with very high blood pressure, and that's always a killer. High because of emotions. Even though she was well received by many on earth, she wasn't by others. She didn't take well that sort of rejection when all she wanted is to share and to do good, sharing what she knew. She had several strokes throughout her last year. The eye stroke was only one of the more visible ones, but she had others in other organs, resulting in a total weakening of her body. And as she did not heal, because she continued under the same thought pattern of taking things too much at heart, letting everything affect her too much, she continued to have strokes, until one day she had one in the brain, and that was all for her. Quick question before you go on. Did she reincarnate somewhere? If she didn't loop back like other versions of herself, so where is she? She just vaporized and went all into you, Yazhi? While we were together, we did become the same consciousness, as variants only, due to the different point of attention and the cellular or body memory of an older body. And that body memory is the one that was holding the thought pattern that kept her under so much stress that it caused high blood pressure, that in turn resulted in multiple internal strokes. Why didn't she go into pod to heal herself entirely? I know she did once. She returned all healthy, but then again fell. Apparently healthy, but she did go back to old bad habits. I could have overridden her thought patterns, but I was too little back then. I mean mentally. And I was nowhere as strong mentally as I am now. Swaruu 9 was striving and doing her best to be more spiritual, to become etherical, to become a light being. I could even say she was obsessed with that. And she even bought into the food issue about the less you eat, you have more connection to spirit, as this image conveys. So some days, all she ate was lemon juice and ice water. Many very knowledgeable elders from many races and cultures do see it as possible to live on prana, on sunlight, and Swaruu 9 was trying that as well. There is some truth to that, I must accept, but it's not as simple, because Swaruu 9, although I remember she didn't say so and even was against neglecting the physical body, in reality did neglect her physical body. She died of a combination of stress-related health issues like very high blood pressure and undernourishment. This caused a chain reaction that caused multiple internal organ strokes or blood flow loss. That is also the cause of her high blood pressure, as the body is pushing blood harder for it to be able to reach affected organs. Example of this was her eye, but far from being the only organ, that was failing. So, as she did not eat, her body did not have the building blocks necessary to repair the problems it was having, causing it to eat itself, as she, at the last part of her life, weighed as little as 42 kilos. She was never a large woman, at 150 centimeters, but even for that stature, she was way too thin. So her body continued to deteriorate, having or suffering more internal injury due to the strokes she was having, although a major factor was psychological stress. One day, she simply got a bad stroke in a critical area, automatic motor functions area in the brain, and she died. That is what happened to her from a physical point of view, internally. Mentally, as it had happened before, between Swaruu I and Swaruu Papriyananda, Swaruu II, when there is a more interesting point of attention for a mind, it will tend to go there and neglect the other less interesting point of attention. Points of attention being physical bodies. This does not happen if both points of attention are interesting for the soul having the experience of two bodies or more. As with Swaruu I, Swaruu IX was carrying a lot of hurt from countless adventures through time, and memories as well, of everything she had done before during her short but very intense life as a sand clock pilot, and also handling the combined memories of 8 direct versions or incarnations as herself, and of past lives as well before being Swaruu. And all that did add up into hurt and nostalgia. And when Swaruu XII arrived, the same thing happened as back in the day when Swaruu Ananda I was also full of feelings of abandonment and had a little daughter full of life, wonder and expectations. So when Swaruu XII arrived to Toleka, the ship, again a clean and new Swaruu was available as a point of attention for her soul, with resolved issues about her past, and again full of wonder and joy of living. Whenever two exact bodies are together, their frequency is the same, so the signal from source, the soul as many call it, has two exact entry points. Same happens to identical twins. So her having a damaged body and a lot of hurt inside, programmed as a body response from a physical point of view as emotional triggers and reflex emotional responses, her attention was fascinated to be able to have another new point of attention, Swaruu XII, Yazhi, me, neglecting the older Swaruu IX body, causing it to deteriorate even more to the point of death, March 21st, 2020, during spring solstice. This way, her point of attention, her soul, has one point of entry once more in a young Swaruu XII body, aged 9. As Swaruu XII, Yazhi, me, has at least 3 extra incarnations as Swaruu X, X, and Swaruu XI, she also has more expanded perspectives about everything, including how souls work, incarnations, and how the universe works as being the result of consciousness and only consciousness. Swaruu 9 was Swaruu 12 when they both were together on the ship, sharing the same overlord soul, for lack of a better term. So they were one at the moment of her death too. And whatever and all that Swaruu 12 knew about matter and bodies being only the reflection and materialization of an ego self-concept and nothing more than potential energy, Swaruu 12 could dissolve Swaruu 9's body, right there where she was lying down dead, just holding on to the idea that she was no longer needed at the exact moment of her passing, and transferring everything she ever was to Swaruu 12. She just faded away, as if she never existed. Everything Swaruu 9 ever was and is in me now, Swaruu 12. Everything all the Swaruu's versions ever were, from Swaruu Ananda 1 to Swaruu 11, are in Swaruu 12, Yazhi. So that is the story, and to end this video, we are going to present the differences between them, because this is something you have to clearly understand. They are different people. In the end, they are different people. Swaruu 12 Yazhi is Swaruu, is Swaruu 9, Swaruu 8, Swaruu 7. All of them are contained within her consciousness and converge in her consciousness. Their memories are there, and past experiences and all that. Yazhi has access to those memories, but at the same time she is a different person, and there are very big differences between them in personality, in their habits, and also in their world view. And I want you to listen to this very carefully, and then I think a lot of things will become more clear as to why Swaruu was saying something and seemed to have this and that attitude, and Yazhi seems to have a different type of energy, because she does. She is a different person, being at the same time a convergence of all past Swaruus. Welcome to the 5D and 3D and whatever D world. That's just the nature of reality. So here, we are going to go into the differences between them as explained by Aneeka and Yazhi herself, and then myself. But I think myself, I might go outside for a little bit. I'm going to take you with me on a forest walk, and we will have a chat about how different I perceive Yazhi to be from Swaruu. Until very soon.